Good afternoon, or morning, or evening, wherever you are. My name is Angie Stevens, and I'm part of the conference planning team. We hope you are enjoying the first full day of sessions, and now it's time for the last session of the day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker, Chris Booth from the NatWest Group. Chris is the head of the Quality Centre of Excellence and has worked with NatWest for many years. Today, Chris will be presenting Don't Call Us Special. I'm really looking forward to this, as it looks very interesting. Before I hand over to Chris, there are a few things I just need to run through. This session is K4. Please use this in your feedback, which is obviously very, very important to us. We use it to select the best speaker and also to know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. This year, we're supporting two charities, Lifeboats and Guide Dogs for the Blind. If you're enjoying the conference, please donate to these wonderful charities and you'll have a chance of winning something in our prize draw at the end of the conference. The last thing for me to say is that the session is being recorded. So with no more ado, I'll pass over to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Angie, and welcome everyone to my talk. My name is Chris Booth, as Angie said, and I work for NatWest Group. My presentation is Don't Call Us Special, about mainframe DevOps, and it's a really talk about how at NatWest, how and why we tackled the challenge of moving mainframe development into a DevOps style working, the benefits we got from it, the challenges we face, and some of the lessons learned along the way. So as Angie said, I'm the head of the Quality Centre of Excellence at NatWest. This is a bank-wide function focused on improving the quality of testing and the sort of delivery across the bank. So I don't do the testing per se, so I don't have an army of testers who do testing on behalf of everyone. It's more about the process of testing, how people approach testing, best practices around that testing, some sort of niche skills around accessibility testing and performance testing, and the SMEs are around those sort of skill levels. One of the other things I do, though, is I own the mainframe test environments. So these are the big heavyweight environments that allow people to test, and they're multi-tenanted. They've got lots of different applications running in them, and the huge scale of those applications are testing in those. And it was really the use of those and using those and understanding how people worked in those that really led me into understanding the need for DevOps and why we should do it. So that's where the background to all this came from. So I'm sure many of you on this call have a diagram similar or a chart similar to this. The mainframe is core to how NatWest operates. I mean, NatWest has something like 18 million customers, I think, and the mainframe holds all the data that makes the bank work, essentially. It holds the customer information, it holds transactional information, it holds balances. So pretty much everything you do within a bank involves either retrieving that application, updating a balance, sending a payment, checking a value, all those kind of functions that exist. And all of those live on the mainframe. So when people use ATMs, when they use point of sale, when they use the mobile banking, they all go back to the mainframe to access that information. And you can see some of the numbers on there, 750 million transactions on a peak day. This is the standard thing that NatWest shows to show the scale of our organisation. But this is the importance of the mainframe to the organisation. But again, which won't be a surprise to everyone, the bank as a whole has been adopting a much more agile DevOps style approach to development. So the mobile application, the e-banking, all those kind of things have moved into an agile approach for development, multiple releases. They're looking at, they currently have a release a month, I think, and they're looking at moving that forward. But the mainframe wasn't keeping pace with that. And we ended up with a real mismatch in delivery models. And as you can imagine, that the obvious noise that causes, you're making us slowing us down, we can't deliver what we want because you guys aren't quick enough, and the constant sort of friction that causes. And so this presentation really is how we tackled that mismatch in this delivery models, the tools we used, the approach we talked to with our customers, and the lessons we learned from doing it. So this slide, I recognise, is quite a boring slide with just some words. But the point of it really is that the vision statement about using a self-service portal to request and automatically provision a test environment with all the components and the data, standard services to add change components, change, all those things automatically deployed and automatically QA'd. There's nothing special about this for a mainframe. Hence the name of this presentation, right? Don't call us special. This isn't about, the mainframe shouldn't be different. This is no different to a vision statement that you'd see about DevOps for a cloud environment or some sort of off-host environment. And that, I guess, was the point, the starting point for this, is that what the mainframe shouldn't be different. It's developing on the mainframe is effectively the same skills, it's the same approaches to be used. The only thing that really was stopping us was us. Us saying it was difficult, us saying it was different. So that was our approach. We should think of this as the same as any other development, and how do we build from there? The other thing that this drove really was a cultural change in how people develop solutions, because what we really didn't want to do was just speed things up at one end, but not solve anything else. So if we just work the same way we worked, last year and the year before, just a bit quicker, that didn't really solve the problem. We really wanted to be able to integrate our mainframe development all the way through, so that you'd have eventually maybe a pipeline from the mobile all the way through to the mobile, and the changes went into that. So actually, we've become a fully integrated part of that delivery cycle. And what we found when we started to look at that was that just focusing on the delivery pipeline, i.e., the classic kind of CI/CD solution of automated deployment, automated testing, those kind of areas, didn't actually solve the problem. Because if we just speed up the deployment and the writing of code, we still have the same problem on the test environments. As I said before, I own the test environments, and one of the things that happens on those is that because of the scale of them, they're constantly integrating with each other. They're constantly clashing between application teams. One team's testing, so you can't test. They're changing the data on it. You need to orchestrate essentially between those multiple projects with data updates and so on. And so it doesn't give you the flexibility to operate the way you might want to operate. Plus, it's a lot of infrastructure, right? And there's cost and so on in there. So really what we had to look at, environmental management as part of this. So it wasn't just the pipeline, it had to be about the environment management. So we extended the solution into environment management, and looked at how do we create an up-to-date mainframe environment with all the pieces you need: CICS, MQ, storage, DB2, data, application code, all those aspects together in a short time frame. Can we create that in half an hour or something? I don't know what the time, the ultimate time frame, but can we generate that in half an hour? That would genuinely allow teams to operate differently, because no longer would they be relying on these heavyweight environments. They would have their own environment. They could do what they want with it. They could tear it down, create it, and so on. And it wouldn't need changing down, because all the components would be there, all the pieces are there. They work, and the people can operate directly from there. So they would work for development, support, warranty, whatever you want. So as well as the tooling, we looked at how do we do this, and the solution that we eventually settled on was looking at virtual mainframes. So we used ZVM as a technology for that, and set ourselves a challenge of how do we stand up a fully functional test environment in ZVM, such that it can be instantiated without huge amounts of time and shakedown and so on. So I'll talk a bit more about ZVM as a solution at the moment. So I'll talk about the slide in a minute, but ZVM is essentially just a container that contains the operating system. And we originally set this up just as a container. And what we actually found was that people, which is kind of proves our point about the environment management, was that people that just use them exactly the same way as they use their existing test environments. They were long-lived, they were multiple teams using them, they quickly got out of date, they were hard to support, they got bloated, we ran out of space with ZVMs, in fact, at one point. So just creating the container wasn't enough. We needed to go beyond that into actually all those components need to be created into a kind of version control repository that we could make accessible by deployment and the build tools. So we could genuinely just create the environment that was needed. You just pull it off the shelf, bang, there you go, there's your environment. but it had to involve all the components of your environment, or it doesn't work. So we quickly found that just doing it for one didn't really work. So essentially what we've been doing is going through a program per component. So DB2, kicks, storage. There are 18, I think, in total, top of my head. I think we're about 10 or 12 through. And for each one, we've been doing a sort of 3-stage process to discover what is there. What versions are there out there, and how do we name those versions? How do we store those versions? And then stage 2 is automating it. So how do you capture that version, and where do you store it, and how do you ensure that you can access that particular version as required, and both upload it and deploy it? And then obviously the third aspect is deploy it, because once you've stored it, it's kind of not very valuable. You need to be able to deploy it and retrieve it and redeploy it and deploy it multiple times in the same pattern and so on. And that required, this is the thing that's taken the real engineering, really, that required resources from right across the estate. So you required architects and some vendor support, involved tool expertise, and then obviously the expertise in these disciplines as well. So DB2, kicks and so on. And we had to create a feature team. And ultimately, we've done it essentially we've done it one by one, really, more than otherwise. But you need a feature team per area, because they're all quite specialised and they all need storing. And we had to traditionally, these were scripted generally, so people would write a script and deploy it and so on as to how these worked. And we did use Endeavour for deployment and so on, but there wasn't a mechanism to kind of pull a version off a shelf in a way and deploy it into this huge area that we have now. So we needed to engineer those so we could store them and make them accessible by the deployment pipeline, which is kind of where this roadmap leads us to. And this is where the cultural shift happens, really, because it allows us to move away from the need of every step involving expertise from a specialist area. So you can't go to D2 because you need to do DB2 to deploy it. You can't create kicks. You need a kick supposed to do it. And you actually can create the environment through the tool, so that they just create that environment. And as a developer, you can then work on that environment. So you haven't had to wait, I don't know, whatever, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to get the relevant people involved to deploy it. You can just work through it and use that environment, develop against it, and changes you make can be redeployed back into the environment and then redeployed again for you. So it removes the need for the nervousness we have around test environments where they get out of date quickly. The versions of the underlying software, whether it's DB2 or otherwise, can easily get out of date because people just left them there and not updated them. So it removes all those kind of challenges to do that. So that's the point of this, really. It gives the developer control of the environment and their ability to create and tear that down and so on. So because of the automation. So the developers have that flexibility. So in parallel to this, then obviously we developed the tooling as well. So this is again a fairly standard CI/CD pipeline. It uses Jenkins and Orchestrator. It has a IDE. It has a deployment tool. It has some various testing tools built into it. So again, back to the don't call it special. There's nothing particularly special about this solution. It's a standard model. But what we did find, though, was when we looked through this, was that we needed to look for tools that gelled with the mainframe. So NatWest, every other organisation, has tools, enterprise tools around the DevOps model that they use, whether it's deployment, orchestration, repository, and so on. But rather than, we found that actually we needed to get tools that worked well with the mainframe, gel with the mainframe for actually to make sense. So rather than necessarily picking all the standard tools the bank had, we had to look at specific ones. So you can see on there we used Topaz as the IDE. We've used Urban Code as the deployment tool, Jenkins the orchestrator. So we've Endeavour, you can see on there as well. So we can see that all these we built the pipeline based around the tools that fit the mainframe best, rather than necessarily the bank's tools per se. So we within my team built this pipeline, supported the teams in using it, we then embedded resources with the teams to help support them, make sure they understood it, that they built it slowly. And the rollout of this was done piecemeal, if you like. So we did it step by step. So the IDE was released, and then you can integrate that with testing, and then you can add in SonarQube and all those other areas as a sort of step by step process, rather than trying to release this completely from scratch. And we have a dedicated team supporting this, who also have a feature list along your arm that people would like them to support and update and so on. So this was done. So these two are parallel. So I talked about the environment management and I talked about tooling. So the two were kind of developed in parallel to allow us to get the benefits along the way, rather than necessarily saying that here's the whole solution up front. So in terms of kind of, I guess, where we are so far, in that, so we've developed, so it says productionized, which I guess for testing tools is perhaps not the right word, but essentially it's up and running. So it's used, it's accessible, it is the kind of, if you like, the production way of developing on the mainframe. We've now extended it so application management can use it and support as well. So it's not just development. And really, I guess it's not a very sophisticated slide, but it's the purple bits are just an ongoing process now. So we've been through the process of selling it, if you like, getting the benefits, and you can just adding the components into the model. So I think in your previous slide, we've got DB2 in place, we've then got Kix, and we've got storage coming to build those environment management aspects. And then the tooling, we're looking at, can we integrate with now NatWest's wider model around its DevOps tooling? Can we fit into there? Are there future versions of some of the tools that we should fit in? So if you like, it's certainly in the tooling area, it's moved more into just a ongoing backlog that we just keep working through. And environment management, it's now the list of components. The next phase really we want to move into in 2021 is taking that from beyond just kind of system testing into the much wider environment. Can we start using it for system integration testing? Can we start using it for UAT, and ultimately into production? Now, I get the production is probably a much bigger stretch because of the governance around it and so on. But that's where we should be aiming for. This should be a direct process from people developing in development non-stop, if you like, through into production. And some of the other areas within my team are looking at how you automate that governance. So it isn't just about the tools. It's actually, if you follow the tool process, then you actually get your governance through. You get governance as part of the process because you follow the process. You get your testing complete report, you get your tracking traceability report, all those kind of things come out of the process, which allows you to move into production. So that's that. However, I'm not going to make commitments as to where we're going to make this into production, but definitely, moving this into SIT, UAT, and so on is absolutely where we want to take this. So this slide, which I don't know whether you can hopefully read or not, but it does the detail behind it is perhaps less significant. But this is about the benefits we've got from doing it. So this is a fairly standard pipeline process. So someone's done some development, they're then testing it. They're testing it through SonarQube for scanning, and then creating the package in Endeavour. They're casting that package, reviewing it, executing the package, getting it onto the mainframe, and UCD submitting it, and ultimately, and then it's being tested by the tool Silk Test, which tool we use, and regression testing is being done in UCD. So there's a whole, there's fairly standard activities that you do. And I'm not sure if you can read the in black at the bottom, but for 15 hours of work, roughly manually, we got it down to 10 minutes. So that's and that isn't just that the tool's quicker. A lot of it is actually that the handoffs it removes the need for handoffs. So you don't need to go and create a ticket in this team, in the Endeavour team. Please go and do this for me. And then they misread it, misunderstand it, get it wrong, come back and ask you a question. It goes back and forth. So all that bit goes. So that I think is some of the power of this, is that it just takes out all those handoffs, because the developer just triggers it and they come back and they see the results and they take whatever action they want. They can, sort of bit of a sort of cliche, but they can focus on developing rather than the paperwork broadly, because that's their job, not chasing down people's tickets and where they've got to. The other thing this slide shows, I think, is that the benefits from doing it is an incremental process. So each one of these makes a benefit. So ultimately, you get the benefit from 15 hours or 2 or 3 days worth of work to 10 minutes. But even one of them gives you benefit. So even if you just get the endeavour aspects automated, that gives you the benefit. It takes an hour out. If you do the sonar scanning, it takes 3 hours out. You see the bubbles at the bottom, or the silk test bit, 8 hours. So all those things go away, but you can do it one by one. So that was part of the sort of sales approach for this, is that actually you don't have to wait for the whole thing to get some benefits. By just doing step by step by step, you do actually get some real benefits for this that give you that allow you to sell it, if you like, to the application teams. So in terms of, obviously, user interaction. So if you don't bring the users with you, it doesn't work, right? It's a classic kind of scenario where you built a great tool and nobody uses. So we've had users involved all the way through. We started with one project, kind of pilot project, got that team involved. Effectively, we found someone who's very keen on doing this anyway on the mainframe, used those as the early adopter, got that team involved, started that, and then have now carried on using them as part of our sort of release train planning, sprint planning, and that user is now effectively, we have I suppose you call them an account manager almost, who kind of feeds back into the development teams both features that we're doing, but also equally valuably things back up to us that it's really annoying when this happens. Can we add a feature that removes that? So that's really key to have that user interaction. Started simple and grow the features. Obviously, we had the individual. We started the IDE. We rolled the IDE at first. People use that, and then we added in features and so on. So growing that solution is fairly standard. There's nothing special in this. We created a backlog. Regular show and tells application teams about how they use it. So one of the things the show and tells that are, I guess, we're planning to evolve them slightly. So at the moment, they're more traditional. This is the tool. This is how it works. But one of the things we're looking to do now is it talks about the cultural aspects. Is say, well, we've got the tool and the environment bit. How should we work? Not this is how we used to work. Let's do it a bit quicker. But what does it allow us to do? How does it allow us to work in different ways? And those are sessions we're planning to have over the next few months, because that then gives us the real benefit. So yes, we've got it from 15 hours down to 15 days, down to 15 hours down to 10 minutes. But really, I want teams to change how they work. I want them to work in a different way. I want them to see themselves as agile, see themselves as creating those environments. And that's where, and using the power of the tools we've got, that's what we can do. But it won't work unless we actively sit down with them and work through that opportunity, and don't think of ourselves as bound by how we work now. Think of ourselves as what we've got and how does that work. And the reason I'm confident of doing that is that I've now got 30 feature teams using this, 5 domains. So the domain in NatWest is essentially a business function, so things like home buying or everyday banking. So the domains who use the mainframe, the big ones, payments, and then core, mobile, the sort of retail and commercial, simple terms, they're all using this. So this is now the default way for people to develop. Pretty much everybody develops on the mainframe using, maybe not all of it, but certainly most of it. So we've got the usage. It's now a case of let's go down that cultural road and see where we get to, see what we can do. And we've got lots of stats. We can go through, or I can share about cycle time reduction, how many people days we've saved versus what we would have done versus we've done, across these domains. And we collate these information, we share it back to application teams, both from a I guess, a sales pitch, if you like, internally to the teams, but also slightly wider in terms of, actually, we are making a difference. We are speeding this up and making a difference. But because of that wide usage, we can now tackle this cultural thing and push and take some of the teams through how they can operate differently and why they should operate differently, the benefits that they will get from that, and that will involve not just, I guess, my team, but the sort of DevOps. So I have one of my peers is that it runs the DevOps Centre of Excellence. So bring those sort of people in as well. So let's start thinking. Now we've got the tools there, but let's make sure we tackle this the ways of working aspects, if you like this. So I guess the lessons learned on this for us is that, like a lot of these things, you do have to do funding and dedicate resources. You can't do this as a sign of a death solution. It looks quite seductively easy to do it, while you're developing, but inevitably, the deadlines of a project take over and you don't get it done. So this has worked because I have a dedicated team who are focused on this, and we've been able to take resources from the mainframe sort of services function, who have the real expertise in the tools and the mainframe tools, to take advantage of this, so building a team with those, and also from the users. So getting all those dedicated, even if it's not 100%, but at least quite a lot of their time, actually makes this possible. If you don't, it doesn't. It will take forever, basically. So that's again why the metrics are so key, because they help justify the funding and future funding and next year's funding and so on. But it does need dedicated resources. Start simple and ensure the buy-in bit. I mean, that's project 101, right? We need to make sure that we do get, because it's quite a big change quite often in many cases, or it certainly was at NatWest. We had to make sure we started simple, move step by step, and then obviously get the user feedback into back up. The pipeline environment management bit. This was quite strange in that. We found this by accident rather than deliberately, because there were two separate teams building this. But by doing it, it means that you can make progress on one and not the other, or vice versa, and get the benefit that way in the incremental bit, rather than relying on everything as everything coming together before you can deploy it. So that's really powerful, because you can get the benefits as you go in, and then the other things come on, particularly with the environment management aspect, where it's very technical, because there's a lot of technology under the covers that makes this work. And part of the reason that roadmap we've got for the environment goes out for so long is that there is a lot to do under the covers to make this work. It wasn't NatWest anyway. And so it's meant that we've been able to deliver the pipeline and not get bogged down in the environment management not delivering. Not that I know it hasn't delivered, but it's not seen as not delivering, because you're still getting benefits out of the pipeline. So it's quite a benefit to do that environment management. And I guess the final one is that this isn't a technical solution at all, really. It's a cultural one, and you shouldn't do it just for technology's sake. You should do it for the cultural reasons about the way you develop, the speed of development, the integration of the mainframe into the wider delivery of the organisation that the organisation is offering. And that also means you get the best value from investment, because it's not just about, I bought lots of tools, they're quite useful. It's not just, I bought lots of tools and look, people are working differently. Which is the final point about being brave, right? All the tools and solutions are there. There's nothing we haven't really, we use tools that are existing in the marketplace. We've engineered everything. We haven't come across any showstoppers yet, really. We've come across some challenges, but no real showstoppers. And I think, I guess the lesson for me, having whatever we are 18 months into this, is that it's perfectly possible for the mainframe to operate like any other development environment, right? And that should be the goal. It should be no different to operating, in the cloud or in your own. It's possible to do it, and I guess that we've set up one way of doing it. I mean, I guess it just so happens you get the scalability resilience thrown in as part of the deal, but from a mainframe. But it's perfectly possible to do that, and that's what I hope to take away from you guys. Take away from here that hence don't call us special, right? It isn't special. It's perfect. We should be brave and think of our developers as any other developers and give them the tools to operate like that. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found it useful. I look forward to your questions. I think Angie's been collating them. And also, please don't forget, there's the charity page as well, which I think is a link to at the end of this, or on the GSE website. And also there's a feedback form as well on the end of this presentation as well. So feel free to give any comments, and I'm happy to take them from there. But I don't know, Angie, if there were any questions that people want to raise.
Yes, Chris. Well, thank you for that. It was a really interesting presentation. Yes, we had a question from Kerry. Hold on just a moment, Kerry. And they ask, which matrix do you use to track progress? I think you covered a little bit about statistics.
Did you mean metrics rather than matrix?
Metrics.
Yes, you said matrix, that was all.
sorry, metrics, yeah.
So yes, you're right, I did cover some of that. I mean, I think they're fairly standard ones about, time saved, person days saved, that kind of thing, other metrics we've used to track progress. I suppose there is sort of some. One is, if you like, breadth of usage. So how many people are using it? Because I didn't really want doing it for one team doesn't really work. You have to do it for everybody to get the real value. So I guess there's the breadth, which is the 30 teams and the 5 domains. That's kind of one usage, and then the value comes from the days saved. And I guess there's a softer, which I'm not necessarily sure I've entirely fixed, metric, which is we don't get shouted at because we're seen as slow and behind. But I'm not sure we're necessarily behind. I've fixed that one yet, but I suppose that's the ultimate metric.
Yeah, thank you. So Preeti asks, it looks like you're still using Endeavour as your SCM. Is there any reason for not migrating completely to new VCS like GitHub or GitLab, Bitbucket, etc.? I think ultimately we might get there. I think Endeavour's, the way Endeavour operates and the way our mainframe is set up means that the use of Endeavour is still has real value in that. We are though over time moving the components into Bitbucket, and that's kind of what our roadmap is. So DB2 is there, and then we'll move the other components such that we can have use version control and so on. It's more of a, at the moment we're in both because we haven't necessarily got all the components moved across, but ultimately we will move everything into Bitbucket as a solution. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. We then have a comment from Atul, and he says that it's a very impressive outcomes, and thank you for sharing the lessons learned. It does take huge effort and courage.
Cool.
That. Yeah. And then Jamie, please, says so he was late joining, but he's curious to know if you're using DevSecOps to integrate security into the different phases.
That's a good question. No, we're not. Doesn't mean I don't want to, but we're not really yet. I think part of that is a sort of tooling challenge, and part of it is perhaps culturally one. So we have some very basic security things from sort of SoloQ and stuff, but in terms of full sort of SecOps, no, not really. And I think that is probably one of the other stages we need to move into when we get into production. In fact, for NatWest as a whole, it's kind of mainframe or otherwise, we're not really doing DevSecOps very much at the moment. It's still seen as a kind of separate, you do development and then you have a little security. So that is something that is on our roadmap, but and I think the consequence of us not doing it at the moment is, obvious. We end up with sort of manual security, well, not so manual, but at the end of the process we have a security check and we do some fixes and do that. We have all those classic problems. So absolutely, it is something we want to move into. We haven't achieved it yet, really, and it's not something we've really looked into very hard on the mainframe. But absolutely, I'd be very keen to move into that going forward.
Yeah. Then we have another question. Are there any issues adopting this across teams globally? And does this lead to cheaper cost savings?
Globally, no, not really. I mean, so this is used across. So NatWest has a big presence in India as well as the UK. And the teams are generally split between India and UK, so they're in both locations. So we've not really had an issue with that. I think that's partly because as a function, the teams have operated with multiple locations anyway. So there's no real issue with that. So we haven't had any issues actually at all, kind of from a global perspective. Sorry, I've forgotten the second half of the question. Sorry. There was a global, and what was the other question?
And does this lead to cheaper cost savings?
Does it lead to cheaper costs? Yes, I think it does. I think it gives you the opportunity to think about how your teams are structured, because you don't need people to do admin in the teams anymore, as in raising tickets, supporting the tickets, chasing the tickets. So you get more productivity out of individuals. It gives you then the choice as to what you do about that team. Does that team stay the same size and do more? Or does it shrink because they need less work? It changes. It gives you the opportunity to think about what you do about your teams. One thing I don't think it changes particularly is the kind of the technical skills you need, particularly in the mainframe services area, if you like, the operational areas of running the mainframe. You still need the kick skills and the storage skills and whatever else it is skills from the engineering perspective. Absolutely, they're still required to support not just the mainframe itself, but the engineering aspect of the environment management and so on. But however, it might evolve those skills away from sort of mechanical tasks, i.e. just redeploying this MQ definition or whatever it is, into more sort of engineering skills as well. So it can lead to cost savings. I guess it's a choice as to what you do about it. You can absolutely use it as cost savings, but equally you can use it as a way of changing the definition of your team and how your team operates.
Great, thank you. And Andy said, yes, thank you, great answer. So we don't have any more questions at the moment. Oh, hang on, we do. Sorry.
Colin used to virtually invite me to do this talk, so he's clearly stitched me up with a question.
So, right, we have one from Colin. What would you say were the biggest challenges to moving forward and increasing the capability of testing and deployment?
I think convincing people, so I think initially it was convincing people that you could do it on the mainframe, which goes back to the don't call it special click. So I think, if you were to say DevOps, people would instantly assume cloud and, trendy app developers in a garage in Shoreditch or whatever, and not necessarily the mainframe. And which is why, and it started as a side of desk kind of piece of work with some money that we sort of found to get on with it. So turning that into a genuine thing that's really going to make a difference, it was getting over that hump was the initial thing, that it really was possible to do on the mainframe. You can get tools that do this. You can get the benefits that you get doing this on an app development. So I think that was that sort of inertia, if you like, in the organisation. It's the mainframe. It's not going to allow us to do it. That was a big challenge, tackling that and working through that, and getting through it. And I think the way we showed that was, the way we solved that was the incremental. That was the vision, by where we want to get to, but equally the benefits you get along the way. So I think that was the initial biggest challenge. I think now that's part of the challenge is now the being brave bit. Are we really brave enough to change how we operate? Some of these mainframe testing environments have been there for 20 years, if not longer, probably, and being used. How do we get brave enough to change to actually use them differently? And some teams actually are thinking about doing that and doing that. But across the board, how do we get brave enough to change our operating model?
Yeah. Very good answer. Do we have any more questions? I don't see any more in the chat at the moment. So I think then we'll probably leave it there, Chris. But thank you very much for that presentation. Everyone, please remember to do the feedback. This session was K4. And also, the day isn't over yet. We have the quiz at 8 p.m. GMT. So please try to attend. All that's left to do really is to thank you all for attending today and have a lovely evening.
Thanks very much for your listening and questions.